And at this point, we should have a roll call.
Doug Shepherd.
Here.
Bart Kahn. Absent. Casey Kelly. Here. Gerald Lewandowski.
Here.
TJ McLaughlin. Here. Pam Merlo. Here. Sandy Petrosky. Here.
We have 6 planning commission members present, so we have a quorum. At this point, because this is a special meeting, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Good. We have our agenda confirmed for the evening. Now, the next item of business is public comment, and I'll just remind everyone here that the main activity this evening is the conduct of a public hearing regarding a rezoning proposal. And so at this point for public comment, I would ask that you not comment related to the rezoning proposal that's in front of the Planning Commission, but rather do that during the public comment portion of that, during the public comment portion of that public hearing, which will be not very long from now, okay? So at this point though, we will entertain other public comment from members of the audience, if anyone wishes to be recognized. Very good. There's no public comment as a matter for the record. And item 5 is correspondence, and it's been only a week since our last meeting, and we have no correspondence to acknowledge at this time. So we move on to the next matter before the Planning Commission, which is to conduct a public hearing related to rezoning 6 parcels located in the township. The item is item 13-002, and what we'll do is, after we have a motion to open the public hearing, I'll summarize the procedures, and then we'll go through the procedures, and then eventually we will close the public hearing after we've completed that activity. So at this point, I'm open to a motion from one of the planning commissioners to open up the public hearing.
I make a motion to open the public hearing for rezoning. Do you want all the numbers? Do we need all the numbers? No. At 7:34 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Sandy Petrosky. Yes. Pam Merlo. Yes. TJ McLaughlin.
Yes.
Gerald Lewandowski.
Yes.
Casey Kelly.
Yes.
Doug Shepherd.
Yes. Okay. We'll now open the public hearing at 7:34. And the procedure we'll go through is pretty simple. It comes right out of the Planning Commission bylaws. And we start with the motion to open. I'm in the process of summarizing the procedures, which is the second item. The third item will be presentation from the applicant, which in this case is Salem Township. Then we will have a presentation from the township's planner. And then we will invite public comment. And and the public comment is for comment, it's not for question and answer. And then after we exhaust the public comment related to the subject, then we'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing and then move on to the remainder of the business items we have on this evening's agenda. So at that, we now have the procedure spelled out, and I'd like to invite Ms. Cripps to explain on behalf of the applicant, Salem Township, what we have in front of us.
Well, the Township Board of Trustees passed a resolution. It's number
2012-1211-02 to request the rezoning of 6 parcels that are currently zoned AR. This is in accordance with the ordinance. The township has the right to initiate a rezoning request. The notice was put in the paper. It was published on February 14th. The mailings went out, the notification of the property owners and the surrounding 300 feet per state law that was handled. That also went out on the 14th. And no sign was posted on the property because according to our ordinance, a township initiated rezoning does not require signage on the property. So everything was done according to our ordinances.
Okay. Then let's move on to the next item, which would be a presentation from Mr. Nanny. As the planner has studied this rezoning and has had several findings for us.
Well, thank you. Everyone should have a copy of our report dated February 27th. We did review this rezoning proposal in accordance with the master plan and the Township zoning ordinance and also the State Zoning Act. And we offered our comments in our report. Just as an item of background, this is in response to a rezoning that ultimately ended up before the vote of the people last November for referendum. That rezoning was overturned at that referendum, and the Township Board's resolution was in response to that to establish a zoning for the property. We did review the proposal primarily consistent with section 6805 of the zoning ordinance, which is entitled Findings of Fact Required. This is the section that we as a planning commission and also the Township Board use when considering any rezoning request that comes before you. And that section lists a number of such categories to consider as you're looking at the facts surrounding a rezoning and considering whether that rezoning is appropriate or not. So starting on page 2 of our report, under item 3, a review of the proposed rezoning, we first of all list each of the findings of fact items from that section. The first one is the relation of the rezoning to the growth management plan or master plan of the township and to other governmental units where applicable. And I just want to make a note, this area is part of the Godfredson M14 Urban Service District that's governed by the master plan, part 10 of the master plan. And the proposed rezoning to the residential office park classification is consistent with the master plan, which identifies that area for residential office park use. So we have a zoning district classification and we have a master plan designation, and the proposal is to match those up. The residential office park zoning district is intended to be a transitional area. And so this area is a very good fit for that, where we have residential activity to the north. It's rural residential now. It's intended or proposed to be as part of the master plan. A higher density residential that might be served by public services with the M14 Expressway to the south, and then beyond that, research and research application technology type activities intended for the southern part of the urban service district. So this is that transition area between the two. The second of the categories is whether or not the request of rezoning is justified by changing conditions. And for that, we note the issue we had last year, and ultimately the referendum voted in November. The board has initiated rezoning essentially because of that change in condition related to the zoning of the property, and there is a question about what the appropriate zoning is. This would establish a definitive classification for the property and a zoning district for the property in accordance with the master plan. The third one is related to precedents and possible effects of approval or denial of the rezoning. The key here is the urban service district. This is a special area of the township that was identified. It's been identified in past master plans as a special plan area, and this would establish a pattern, this rezoning would establish a pattern for future activity and future development in that district. Before that, in this capacity of the township and other agencies to provide services, We noted that the property is not served by public water or public sewer at this time, but is planned for it. The Township's engineering consultants have completed in 2006 a utility study for the area that was, for this particular property, that was based on the ROP zoning that as designated master plan. And so it would, the intent is that the future development on this property would have public services appropriate to it as part of that development process. Just a couple of other items, other highlights. The next category is related to the effect of the rezoning on the condition of value of property in the area. The residential office park zoning is intended to be consistent with and compatible with surrounding residential. And we have residential both to the north, we also have residential to the east in Plymouth Township. And so this category would be consistent with that. It also would have a much lower impact than on neighboring properties than the general commercial district that had been proposed, the district that was voted down to referendum. Other factors to consider, we noted, were primarily natural features. There are significant natural features on this property. The master plan notes that. It in fact identifies an area of this property that would be intended for a conservation easement. That's not a zoning classification. That's essentially a method of protecting land through easement that would go on the property. That's not something that we deal with at this level with the rezoning, but it is something that would be addressed as part of any site plan review for any development activity. It's one of the criteria we look at, and the zoning ordinance does contain standards related to preservation of natural features and mitigation of natural features that are removed as part of the development. The other item that we noted was that this would be the first piece of property in the township that would be zoned to this residential office park classification. And it would be the only area, only property in the immediate area, whether in the township or in surrounding townships, would be planned and zoned for this type of office, low-density office type, development activity. There's one property in Superior Township on Plymouth Road, about an acre of land that's in an office district that has an existing building on it. That's several miles away. And the immediate area in Plymouth Township doesn't have anything like that. So this would potentially serve a need that is not currently served in the area. So with that, I just want to remind the commissioners that this is, for you tonight, your action is a recommendation to the Township Board. I encourage you to take a look at Section 6805 and if you do take action tonight to either recommend approval or recommend denial, I would encourage you to include specific findings of fact, whether they come from our report or from planning commission or public hearing comments or your deliberation, to include specific findings that you feel are appropriate to put a foundation under the recommendation that you made. And with that, I would answer any questions.
Thank you. All right. At this point, I'd like to open up the meeting to public comment, and we're gonna all take one turn and speak our piece. I'll recognize you in reasonable order, and I'd like you to be to the point and raise any issues or concerns and such. We'll get it all. Please identify yourself before when you're recognized. Please identify yourself and your interest in Salem Township, whether you're a resident, whether you're a property owner here but not a resident, or such. Okay? So at this point, we can start with public comment. Just raise your hand if you wish to be recognized. We'll go in the back there.
My name is Norm Klein Jr. I'm speaking on behalf of my father, who lives at 10857 Hickory Lane. This rezoning is based on sound planning principles, which is consistent with your master plan. Many residents have lived in the area that is called the USD for a long time. My father's actually lived there for 30 years. When I read the Urban Service District Ordinance and Master Plan, it became very apparent that Salem's founding fathers and prior planning commissioners were very concerned about pre-existing residents in the area. The Urban Service District Ordinance states that future growth should not create adverse impacts on existing residential uses. The plan clearly states that inefficient and incompatible arrangement of land uses will not be tolerated within the Urban Service District. Every effort will be undertaken to eliminate the result of sprawl, strip, hit or miss, or spotty development. One of the purposes of the residential office park district is, in quote, to accommodate certain small office uses in a low-density, spacious campus environment, which are low traffic generators and which are compatible with adjacent and neighboring single-family dwellings. We realize that the current zoning of that property is unrealistic, so we are in support of rezoning the property residential office park. Rezoning it residential office park is consistent with your master plan. We feel that rezoning it ROP would provide a reasonable use of the property and be compatible with the area. When you look at how both sides of M14 is being developed with residential homes in Plymouth Township just to the east of Napier Road, it would appear that you are being very gracious by rezoning it residential office park. Our motive has never been no growth. It's always been about sticking with the plan. Please don't forget the fact that over 70% of Salem's residents that voted in last November's election were in support of sticking with the plan. Please do so by rezoning this property residential office. Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Aaron. I'm a resident of Salem Township. I live at 10595 Hickory Lane. I'm a neighbor to Mr. Klein and his family. I would hate to have just one person from the audience say that they approve of this and think this is a good move. I want to second his remarks that I feel exactly the same way. And I think that this move is just ideal for this property. An excellent move for the township and an excellent move for the people here. I was one of the supporters, obviously, that area is right next to Napier Road, and although our house is not bounded, it would be very close to us. It's right, in fact, this area is right around us. And I encourage you to actually go see the property and see where we live, to see why we believe this. I think Norm made a very strong case months ago before the November election that this area is quite special and it's been developed very nicely. It's very park-like. And I think the action you're taking now to make it a residential office park would very much fit in with the area that we live in. And thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Dan Vergary, and I live at 10619 North Territorial, right across from the proposed area. And I just rise to support the statements of the previous two speakers.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm Ralph Robinson. I'm at 10711 Hickory Lane. I share a 1,000-foot border or lot line with our development property that's under consideration. And I second the discussion so eloquently defined by Norm Klein. We think office residential is an excellent purpose for that development of the property. We've been active in participation in master plan 5, 6, 7 years ago, and sticking with that plan we think is very consistent with our objectives, and I believe the objectives of any development property that's suitable for our township. So I would recommend that the rezoning be taken as recommended.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening, my name is Robert Carson. I represent the owners of the property, or the owner of the property, Salem Springs Limited Liability Company. We are somewhat confused by the process that has been put forth today. Our initial confusion comes because the Salem Township Board of Trustees some time ago adopted a resolution whereby the master plan was supposed to be studied and altered in connection with this property. That resolution was passed some time ago. We were waiting for that to happen because the current master plan, as has been referred to, is not reflective of the current uses that are approved in connection with and adjacent to this property. So that's the first item of confusion for us, since that has not gone forward, and that is a prior binding resolution on the township by its township board. The second item of confusion is, while the township has the ability to generate a request for rezoning, I've never seen it where the resolution itself says it is unequivocal that the rezoning should take place by the body that is waiting for you to make a study and a recommendation to it. It's almost like it's a foregone conclusion. If you look at the resolution that was passed, that exact language is used. So this appears to us to be a sham. The third reason why we think it's a sham is because they're looking to you to make findings of fact and conclusions and recommendations, and you've done no study. So all you've done, apparently, is heard a recommendation from somebody who refers to existing uses, but ignores the existing uses of my client in respect to the exact adjacent property, which gave rise to the earlier resolution by the township board that you should be studying a change in the master plan. Because the master plan that exists today does not accommodate the current uses that are approved adjacent to this property. Now, in connection with the property, we are also confused because we had entered into a series of discussions with representatives of the township, which this is the exact opposite of those ongoing discussions. So not only are we a little confused, we feel a little bit blindsided by the current Board of Trustees as to what's really going on here. The other thing that you may not know is what's the current circumstances that exist between Salem Springs, the owner of the property, and this township. While the referendum passed, there are substantial questions as to the legality of the referendum, and in fact, there is litigation that's currently pending and has been pending even before the referendum took place in the Washtenaw County Circuit Court. That matter will come to disposition this year and may involve, I make no book, but may involve the overturning of the referendum itself, which would then challenge this activity also. There's been a long history of potential disputes which we try to put behind us between Salem Springs LLC and the township. Those disputes have resulted in 3 arbitration awards by the binding arbitrators in connection with the arbitration with Salem Township between Salem Springs. All 3 awards have been in favor of Salem Springs Limited Liability Company. All 3 awards have been accepted by and converted to judgments of the Washtenaw County Circuit Court. 2 of those awards were recently converted to judgments in the last 6 months. In the last few months, those awards included an award of money damages against this township of in excess of $250,000, which this township now owes for its past inappropriate activities towards Salem Springs. It is the last thing that Salem Springs LLC wants, is to have another dispute with Salem Township. We pay taxes, we own a substantial amount of land, We're trying to make a substantial investment. We have worked diligently with the representatives of Salem Township and various utility companies to bring forward utilities to this site. We are in current negotiations with your current attorney and the township with Yucca in connection with wastewater treatment. We've done extensive studies of hydrology to bring public water to the site. We have a binding arbitration award and judgment for that type of water to be brought to the site. So we are totally confused as to what's going on here and object to this entire process. No studies have been done by this planning commission in connection with the facts that I've just laid out. And therefore, for the planning commission to adopt findings of fact and conclusions of law based upon no study as to what the current conditions are. In fact, the findings that were relayed to you by the planner do not reflect the current uses that are entitled to this property, or the adjacent property, I should say. Now, when these people, and I respect the people who live there, when these people lived there, Salem Township, with those residents in place, adopted the Urban Services District. It adopted, so far as I understand it, the Urban Services District in order to bring more intense development to a particular area of the township, in order that the remaining areas of the township could remain essentially rural in nature. Recognizing that at an important intersection, Godfredson and M14, there was going to be development. In an attempt by the township to restrict the intense development of the township to that area, it adopted a substantial area of the township for Urban Services District. That's the policy that exists. It will have an effect upon the people who lived there before the Urban Services District was created. That was a known consequence of the townships adopting the Urban Services District. It is the natural consequence of that. And in order for the township to defend its designation of the Urban Services District, which means that it wants only intense development in this area, it must respect the natural consequences. Otherwise, the activity that it attempts to limit to the Urban Services District will not be limited to that area alone. There are other areas within the township which will become vulnerable to that type of development. Not only did that happen, but it held itself out. This township held itself out to the public to say, come and invest in this area, and we will respect more intense development. And that's exactly what we did. And we paid taxes. Now, I understand there's very little taxes here in this township, but it won't last forever. And this kind of development will go on in that area. We would like it to be done amicably. We've offered a number of modifications to what would normally go forward in that area. We did that through the 2 development agreements that exist with respect to the northern, more heavily high-density residential, and we have general commercial on Godfredson Road, north of N14, in a substantial 50-acre piece, which will be developed. And that will abut this area. So you're going to have high-density residential, which is not contemplated in your master plan, to the north and to the east. And on the west side, substantial commercial development, which is not contemplated in the master plan that's been referred to. And that's what abuts this property. And this thin strip of property along M14 invites much more intense use than a residential office park. To the extent the township wants, as was referred to, as a conservation easement, there's an easy way and only one way for the township to get there. Buy it. Pay for it. You can do it either voluntarily or involuntarily through eminent domain taking, or essentially an eminent domain taking by restricting the use. But it's not by doing this kind of irregular procedure. There is no reason, by the way, for a special meeting. Why is that happening? Thank you.
Well, my name is Stephen Foley. Like Mr. Carson, I'm an attorney. I represent Mr. Norman Klein. Mr. Carson has given you plenty of reasons of why he likes to sue the township. He's claiming he's made money off you guys. But the issue before this commission today is unrelated to those other things that he's claiming victory on. Today is a chance for this township to make a statement to out-of-towners, such as Mr. Carson and his client. How so? The board, approximately a year ago, under that guy there, made a mistake. Had they read the master plan, they would have realized by trying to change zoning from AR, agricultural residential, to commercial, general commercial, was inappropriate. Why? The information that was conveyed to you today, and in a sense, allows you to study the situation, okay? Just like Mr. Carson and I study by reading. Where you've had documents to read, you also have a master plan and a USD that you can read. That's how you study, that's how you learn, okay? And what does it tell you? It tells you this guy's wrong. Totally. Can you imagine my client, Mr. Klein, who's been sitting there in a beautiful home, along with his neighbors who've come up here today, okay, for 30 years. Do you think they want 60-foot lights, constant traffic, day in, day out? 24 hours a day when they were there first? When this property was purchased by Salem Springs LLC, knowing that there was a master plan that suggested ROP. Why ROP? For the reasons that Norm Klein said. It fits. It feels good. It's what should be there. So you've had all this information for years. And now it's a matter of doing what's right. Again, the referendum went about because a mistake was made by the prior board. The referendum was overwhelmingly in favor of saying, GC, you're out of here, okay? So, the planner has provided you information. Your own plan has provided you information. And my suggestion is that there's been plenty of studies done already. And if you've read any of this, you've done your job. And we're recommending ROP to finalize that job. Thank
you. We have other people, anyone else that would like to comment during that portion of this meeting? With that, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing on item 13-002 at 8:04 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Lewandowski with the second, so we need a roll call vote. All in favor say aye when your name is called.
Carol Lewandowski,
Yes.
TJ McLaughlin,
Yes.
Pam Merlo, yes. Sandy Petrowski,
Yes.
Casey Kelly,
Yes.
Doug Shepherd.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. We've ended our public hearing. That now brings us to a new business item, agenda item number 7, which is for the Planning Commission to consider the rezoning of 6 parcels from agricultural residential to residential office park. And before we start into this item, I'd like to remind the members of the Planning Commission and also offer this up for the people in the audience as to what Salem Township zoning ordinance specifies with regard to this item. And what it says in section 68.05 is findings of fact are required. All the relevant items, but very specifically, there were 5 items that are mentioned, right? The items are whether or not the requested zoning change is justified by a change in conditions since the original ordinance. Another item is the precedents and possible effects of such precedents which might result from approval or denial. The capacity of the township or other agencies to provide services, facilities, or programs that might be required. The effect of the approval of the petition on the condition and/or value of property in Salem Township. And then finally, the relation of the petition to the adopted growth management plan of the township. So, with that in mind, what I'd like to do now is open up the discussion to the members of the planning commission for asking very specific questions of our experts or a representative in the audience if we so feel we need to do that. So there's 6 of us here. I'm sure we have a few questions related to this rezoning that we would like to ask. Who would like to go first? Mr. Lewandowski.
Ed, I don't know, back, I was a planning commission on 6 and 7 years, 2006, 7 around there, maybe a little earlier. But this was, the topic back then was the urban services. And I am almost sure, but I'm not positive because I can't find my paperwork, but I thought it was discussed back then that this section would be residential office because of the housing, the Robinsons and Kleins that live along that back piece would be considered. But I hadn't, since I was been out since that, I don't know if any of that had transpired or not. But I recall talking that when it was the Jello map, if I may, at that early stages, and people trying to figure out, and everyone was trying to figure out what would we do with that section. We knew the northeast would be residential. Goffredson would be the commercial area because it's right there by the interchange. But this section along M14 was kind of up in the air, and this residential office park sticks in my head because we thought possibly the wooded section closer to the back of like the Robinsons' land would be residential along there, and the other side closer to the freeway would be your office park section. But that's as far as it went, and I think that really for this piece of land, that to me is perfect for there. I can't visualize general commercial backing up to homes and things of that nature. But I don't know if that's, if my thinking is correct on that. But I recall that because I've been down Hickory Lane back in there where the Robinson live, and I came in from the Goffredson side looking, because the township, I believe, that owns a small hunk of ground back in there that's leased out for farming and that. And I look at it and I don't see anything else because you got the condo complex along the power lines, and that and the only thing close to that is the nursery Christians there. And I think the township also has some property on Goffredson that was considered to be a substation for the fire department if and when that ever took off over there. So I don't know, you know, to me, I think that's residential office park is perfect for it, but I can't recall if, you know, if I'm correct on making my statement. I wish I could find my paperwork, but I can't. Because I saved, kind of had a tendency to save that stuff.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Were you asking them
No, I'm just, if he had any recollection during the previous administration of any discussion.
I'd like to hear him answer that.
You know, if there was any discussion with the previous administration planning commission, I know the planners here are relatively new as far as the USD goes. And yet I think I'm about the only one that was involved years ago.
Did you
How about
answer that,
Ms.
Mr. Clayton?
Tell me the master plan map that was adopted in 2005.
I'd like to hear his answer to that.
Was there a question posed by Mr.
Regarding the
Dombrowski?
ROP that was talked about back in, I think it was 5, 6, or 7, one back in that time frame.
Well, the Urban Service District Ordinance was passed on March 17th, 2005. That was the effective date. And the ROP is listed in there, and there's also mapping in the master plan that shows. So it was discussed.
The other thing I would note, in the master plan, there is a history, a summary of the history on page 83 and 84 of the Goffredson Road M14 Urban Service District. And it refers back into the 1960s as the time when this discussion was beginning to take place. Of course, the freeway came through in the 1970s, and so that would be when there was substantial discussion about it initially. But there is a history in the plan, showing that there's a long-standing interest in this area being designated for urban land uses.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm all set.
Now, Ms. Killing?
When the current owners purchased the parcel, what was the zoning back then? What was it zoned?
Yeah, I mean, prior to last year's rezoning process, it was agricultural residential, AR.
And what are they wanting it to be zoned for? What does the owner want to happen with this parcel?
Well, last year there was an application that came before the Planning Commission last March that was submitted by the owners to rezone it to general commercial. The Planning Commission recommended denial. It went to the board in June where they approved the rezoning to general commercial. And that's the action that ultimately went before a referendum vote last November and was overturned.
Is there any question that the referendum is legal?
Is there any question whether the referendum is legal?
Well, currently the referendum issue is in litigation. So right now there's an issue whether, if that litigation is successful, the property would remain as rezoned by the prior board general commercial. If it's not successful, the referendum would prevail, and the property would then be back to agricultural. So it's an open issue at this point.
Okay, so are we perfectly legal in what we're doing and even handling this before it's been resolved?
Is your question, is there anything preventing the Planning Commission from going forward with the recommendation? Because of the pending litigation, no, nothing would prevent the Planning Commission from going forward.
You good? Okay. How about down at the far end, Mr. Dombrowski?
Mr. Cripps, you could probably answer this for me. The cost of agricultural residential land, is it the same price as general commercial land? Is there any price differential? I mean, if you purchase something that's agricultural, would it be?
Only if it's developed.
Okay.
Vacant
No,
land.
Sandy, is your mic on?
Oops, I'm sorry.
I am not sure, I'm not an assessor, I'm not sure how they value it. My feeling is that general commercial land is sometimes more valuable on the open market than residential, but that's just a guess on my part, I'm not an assessor.
Okay, so if I understand, Mr. Carson, your client purchased this property with an AR zoning, is that correct? And he was well, or they were well aware of that it was AR, correct?
When my client purchased the land, it was part of the Urban Services District, which contemplated a change in use. And since the time my client purchased the land, the other portions of the property that my client acquired has had the change in use that my client contemplated. It was not bought with the concept that it would be agricultural. Everybody knew it could not sustain agricultural zoning, and therefore was not purchased as agricultural land, if that answers your question.
Okay. And I'm looking at our urban services district, that was the amendment or the general provisions, design guidelines, special zoning districts, because the urban service district is one of our special zoning areas along with the hamlet. And this was adopted in 2005, as Mr. Cook said. I do not see under the special use of districts defined any general commercial. I'm assuming that your client then knew that was not an accepted zoning for something in the urban services district. Am I correct in that you are saying your client does not want this rezoned to ROP?
Commercial uses are contemplated in the Urban Services District.
General commercial.
Essentially, commercial uses are contemplated. Okay, so that's the first thing. My client did not want and has not solicited the rezoning of this property to ROP. That's a correct statement. We believe that it should have commercial uses. We've offered the township any number of alternatives for commercial uses, so that you know that. It was made clear before the township board. We submitted agreements which would restrict the certain types of commercial activity. We did that voluntarily with respect to the piece along Godfredson Road. We were willing to do it with respect to this, but we didn't have an alternative other than general commercial, but even offered on the night that it was rezoned to bring forward those types of restrictions. Drafts of that exact language were delivered to the township and its council. So, in answer to your question, it's not as specific as your question may be, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful with respect to it. Urban Services District contemplates intense use. The justification for an urban services district, and the only justification to limit intense use in this township, is to allow that type of use here. If the township does not, it will not be able to, I believe, defend its urban services district and limit that type of activity to this area. General commercial or commercial that is restricted, but commercial uses, similar to what has been approved and is binding on the township along Godfredson Road, that 50 acres, is appropriate here in the most traffic-laden area, because that is the full length, most frontage along M14. Highest visibility, could easily be screened. The residential property could easily be screened by a reasonable approach that we are more than willing to undertake to screen not 60-foot lights that have that interfere with the residences. This is done all over the place with respect to light restrictions, etc. So that's the appropriate use. It was contemplated by us. The residential office park is not. If the township doesn't want development and is against any development along this area, zone it residential office park. There's no market for it. There's no activity with respect to it. We've heard that the township wants to contemplate what was referred to as conservation easements in that area. That's just another word for saying we've established the USD, but will not allow uses there. If that's what the township wants to do, it should be straightforward with respect to it and say, look, we want a conservation easement over this area. We don't want any development there. We'll be able to deal with that, or buy it. But don't say this is the area for intense use. Recognize that what's on both ends now, and say that you won't have compatible uses. I didn't mean to take more time. Thank you.
I think in the future, if we want to raise a question to someone in the audience, that we should go through me and make sure I recognize them rather than having it a direct question and answer. And, you know, but
No problem.
we'll also be as flexible as we can here to have an orderly meeting. Did you have anything else, Ms. Petrosky?
Not right now.
Okay, how about Ms. Merlo?
Yes.
Carson referred to the master plan being studied and altered. Do you have any information on that?
I don't know what action the prior planning commission took with regard to that or board directive.
I think, if I can help, right, maybe Mr. Carson said when I was listening that the previous board undertook a resolution charging the planning commission with changing the master plan or studying revisions to the master plan, but I haven't seen such a resolution. I don't know if anyone else has that. You offer it up and we'll let Mr. Plato look at it.
This was, there was at the same meeting, May 2012, at which the property was rezoned from agricultural to general commercial. There was a motion made by Supervisor Heil at that time to instruct the Planning Commission to review the master plan, especially the area of the USD, and update that section accordingly based on the current usages for all properties.
So that was based upon what they overturned, which was opposite of the original recommendation? Or they're
Well,
just saying update the plan
Okay,
based
so
upon their vote?
I'll just ask a question. So we don't have a resolution from the township board to take such action?
Well,
You're referencing a motion made, but a motion is not a resolution, correct?
well, those words can be used interchangeably. There was a motion, it was passed to instruct the Planning Commission to review the master plan to make sure that it's consistent with current usages for the properties. Now, whether the Planning Commission took that up, I don't know. That's a different story. It's a recommendation by the board to the Planning Commission.
I mean, we could ask Ms. Cripps, but I don't believe that that's been a business item at the Planning Commission in the last 10 months.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I'm sorry, so I interfered with your question in this one.
No, I was looking for help. Mr. Plato, can you answer the question of what is being questioned in the referendum that is the owners of the property are questioning why it's in litigation?
I think Mr. Carson may want to join in. I think the primary issue in the pending referendum litigation is whether or not there was timely submitting of the petitions for the referendum in relation to when the publication of the rezoning occurred. The Zoning Enabling Act requires that petitions be filed within 30 days of publication. There was some issue with regard to publication date. It was, in fact, the notice was republished, I think, 4 times altogether. And Mr. Carson's position is that the first date of publication would control when the petitions had to be filed, and since they were not filed within 30 days of that first publication, therefore, anything that's filed thereafter is invalid. Is that correctly?
I'll wait for this. Sure. Yes, go ahead. If you, see the point.
The issue that Mr. Plato stated is a correct issue, and the township's attorneys have admitted that it was not timely under questioning by the Washington County Circuit Court and otherwise. It was a defective vote.
Okay, thank you.
May
we just correct that?
have a chance to speak?
We're still working with Mr. Plato here.
There was no admission that the petitions were timely. There was an admission that the first publication that was in the AnnArbor.com met the requirements of the statute.
So it was submitted 4 times, and the petitions came in, then
Timely.
after the first, when, if you can just kind of create a timeline for me. You know, this one was submitted here, when was the next one submitted? 30 days later, 2 months later? And then where did the petitions fall in line there?
The petitions were definitely more than 30 days after the first publication. What happened was there was a requested publication submitted simultaneously by the Township to AnnArbor.com and the South Line Herald. The South Line Herald, because of their publication date, would have missed the requirement to publish within the time frame required by the Zoning Enabling Act by 1 day. AnnArbor.com, on the other hand, was able to get it in timely. Then the South Line Herald did still proceed to have the publication, but when they published it, it had a number of errors in it. They didn't have the correct title. It referred to budget hearings and not the zoning amendment. There was a subsequent publication of South Line Herald that again had mistakes. And finally, after I think the 4th time, they got it right. And it was within 30 days after that final publication that the petitions were filed. So the petitioners claim that they filed it within 30 days of the last publication, which they contend was the correct
The accurate
publication
one.
date.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for right now.
Okay,
In
perhaps,
response to some of your questions, again, my name is Steve Folk, all right? It's our contention on behalf of the concerned citizens of Salem and Mr. Norman Klein that the initial publication in AnnArbor.com was inappropriate. Why? Well, within a month or 2 prior to that publication, the board of Salem Township confirmed that it was actually the South Line Herald that was a proper publication. So there was an improper publication to begin with. And then my client, Mr. Klein, did file sufficient signatures after we were told by the township and its attorneys to do so after that 4th publication in the South Line Herald. We followed what the township attorneys told us. And in regards to the claim that the petitions were untimely, Mr. Carson lost at Washtenaw Circuit Court by trying to stop the referendum. He went to the Court of Appeals and was denied there, and went to the Supreme Court of Michigan, and again was unfortunately lost again.
okay.
Now I have questions.
I just want to interject myself here and ask a question of either Mr. Plato or Mr. Nanny, and that is we have a zoning ordinance that explains what the planning commission's role is with the conduct of a public hearing and then making a recommendation to the township board. And we have guidance as to the things that we should consider. I would like your opinion as to the relevance or lack of relevance of discussion of things relating to last year's actions by the township board on the rezoning of this parcel, the way it took place in the referendum. Are those factors with what we have to consider tonight?
In my opinion, I don't think those are relevant factors for your consideration. Whatever happens on the litigation, it may affect whether the referendum stands or doesn't stand. But this planning commission should consider what's before it, and that is simply whether this should be rezoned. Obviously, there's a question right now whether the property is zoned agricultural or whether it's zoned general commercial. The issue for this planning commission is what you think you should recommend to the township board that it be zoned.
Okay, and okay, if I read from Mr. Pennington's report, the very, very last paragraph, it says, "In reviewing any rezoning request, Public Act 110 of 2006 requires the Planning Commission to identify and evaluate all the relevant factors, report its findings and recommendations to the Township Board, and any recommendation should be in the form of a motion to approve or denial, and I suppose we could take action tonight by postponing the decision to a later point," right? So we really have three choices, and what we're charged with is based on the information provided by the experts, by the petitioner, which in this case is the Township, and by the information brought forward in the public hearing, really determine what we want to do with the recommendation as the Planning Commission. And so I'd like to keep the discussion focused on that rather than these actions that took place in the past that may be confusing to some people in the audience, but to me, I find that they're not in line with the charge in front of the Planning Commission this evening. Okay? So, maybe Ms. Merlo has something else? Or
One more. And Mr. Plato or Mr. Manny, you can confirm, it's my understanding, well, it's it's consistent with studying about what the land should be zoned as, and it appears that we're looking at this now. We have the capability to change the zoning even of the property or of any property when there have been no building permits or there has been no development on the land, so the land has not changed at all. Correct? So we have the ability to redo this, and that is state law?
That's the law of Michigan, is that you're correct. Until construction is begun on the property, the township can rezone that property however it sees in its best interest, or the community's best interest.
Okay. That's my last question.
how about Ms. McLaughlin?
Yeah, whoever can
Mike,
answer,
please.
whoever can answer this question. Is there something specific in the written master plan for that area? Recommendations of usage? I mean, is it written down? This is recommended as ROP. Do we have a listing? This is recommended as any of a number of these uses?
I can certainly answer that. Part 10 of the master plan covers the urban service districts, and there are two. One is the Hamlet area, and the other one is the Goffredson Road N14 area we're talking about tonight. And Part 10 is very detailed in terms of both the intent of the district, the various types of activities that would be permitted, getting down to design concepts for landscaping, for layout of buildings and parking. And then as part of this section of the master plan, there's a map number 19, which is entitled Urban Service District Development Concept. And this is the one that essentially lays out, we might call it a zoning plan today, that lays out the intended designations or intended types of land uses for various parts of the district. And the property in question is marked on this map as residential office park.
When was that made?
This master plan was updated and adopted March 16th of 2009.
Okay, so was this designation made in 2009?
Well, the urban service district goes back much further than that. As the master plan mentions, the discussions go back to the 60s, certainly after N14 came through and there was a freeway interchange at Goffredson Road in the 1970s that accelerated. This concept was also in the 1998 plan, so it has a long history in the township.
Okay. I mean, so this has been part of the master plan for a while?
Yes.
Okay, and then I had another question. The man in the audience raised a point that he says that current uses adjacent aren't reflective of the master plan. Can you give me any information on that?
Well, the existing land uses to the north of this property are rural residential. There, as was mentioned, there's site condo type development. These are large lot residential currently that are not served by public utilities. This map 19, the urban service district development concept, shows those areas to the north of this property as urban residential, urban single-family residential. So a higher density potentially than exists right now. Directly to the east of this property, across Napier Road, of course, is Plymouth Township, which has areas that are served by public utilities and has higher density, primarily residential activity in the immediate area. To the west is a utility corridor. We have several ITC transmission lines that transect this area, and there's a north-south utility corridor that directly abuts this property to the west. Beyond that, you have the land that fronts along Godfredson Road. That land is identified in this map and in this plan for what's called the Commercial Commons Park. This is a commercial land use designation. It's intended to allow commercial activity. The land uses are somewhat different than the general commercial classification, but it is a commercial zoning classification. That's what the land that fronts along Gibbs Road is designated in this document.
So are there businesses or entities there that are like acting outside of their zoning?
Well, there certainly are activities along the Godfredson corridor. As I think somebody mentioned, the landscaping business at North Territorial. And I think probably Mr. Plato can discuss in more detail the discussion that's taking place or actions that take place related to any other development agreements or such in that area.
Yeah, there were, obviously, the owner of this property, Salem Springs, has two other large parcels that are subject to development agreements that were agreed to between the township and Salem Springs that govern the development on that property. One is for the residential section, and one is for the retail section of the property. This piece of property being considered tonight actually lies between that residential development and the retail development. But those are separate. They were developed pursuant to agreed upon contractual development agreements between the township and the developer.
You okay? All right. I have a few questions. I'm trying to get my arms around a couple of things here. Let's see, where do I start? Okay. The USD, I think it's section 50 in the zoning ordinance, right, where we talk about the urban services district. It sets out 5, I don't know, zoning districts, I guess. Single family, residential, multi-family residential, residential office park, commercial commons park, and research activities, I think, are the 5. And I'm trying to understand how to characterize those. Are those characterized as intense development or not as intense development? Could you answer? What do planners think about that?
The urban service district is intended to provide space for more intensive land use than is otherwise contemplated in the township. The provision is primarily for public water and sewer service, physically allows for more intensive activity that would be possible if you had to rely on a private well or private septic service. So the special use districts that are defined in the zoning ordinance for the urban service district are certainly intended to be more intensive than than rural activities elsewhere in the township. They are labeled as urban in character, urban single-family residential. Certainly multiple family residential is an urban land use rather than a rural one. And the non-residential activities typically would be ones that would be best developed with public utility service. So that's why the research, the technology activities, and the office activities are intended for this area.
Okay. When I read our charge here in our zoning ordinance, in this 6805D, it says we need to consider the effect and approval of the petition on the condition and or value of property in Salem Township. Well, when we state that, I interpret that as we have to consider not just the property that's being proposed for rezoning, but literally the community's property, right? As it might be affected by this rezoning charge. So when you consider the effect on the condition and or value, you know, it's possible, to me anyways, that you don't optimize any one parcel, but rather you're optimizing the aggregate for the benefit of the community. Is that correct?
Many times, certainly, when you're undertaking this type of process, your job is to contemplate the effect on not just the immediate neighbors, but on the area as a whole. And as the ordinance says, beyond even our municipal boundaries, considering the adjacent communities. And so, yes, you absolutely should be considering the overall effect, but also and considering not just the effect on this the rezoning of this piece of the urban service district, but what is the effect overall on the area designated for these urban services by this rezoning. So your charge is a comprehensive one.
Okay. So I think we're saying the same thing. You of course, in a much more detailed professional way. But, so I see us having to consider all of this rather than just the individual parcels themselves, because it's a community decision on the rezoning. All right. And now I've got one other question, again, because we're talking about understanding the impact and the precedent we set and such. And that is if the planning commission conducts its business and sends this forward to the township board with a recommendation, and then the township board goes and actually approves this rezoning, because it's their job, not the planning commission. If they do that, does that preclude the landowner from bringing further rezoning proposals forward? No. So they have the right, as we all do, to submit petitions for rezoning at any time. And subject to our review process. Okay, that's what I needed to know. Second rounds here.
If I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Carson a question.
I'm sorry?
If I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Carson a question.
Yes.
Mr. Carson, you stated that Salem Springs would like that to be general commercial. I look at this map of general residential office in here, and then on our planning section here. I can't see general commercial on the east end of that property when there's an overpass there. And how do you get out for general commercial just on the west end of that property? Make all the traffic go west and make Goffredson Road then congested? Because that's what would happen if that was zoned general commercial, because how do you get out on Napier Road when there's a slope going down over from the overpass?
I believe the traffic would go both east and west. And I believe that the activity along Napier Road would be worked out with the Washita County Road Commission, or the Wayne County Road Commission, both of which have jurisdiction over that area, and any curb cuts in the expansion. And I believe that they would also have to Salem Springs property on the west access to Godfredson Road. So they would go in both directions, if that answers your question. As you know,
On the east end, it's all residential. So you want to run trucks through a residential area then?
no.
What else would you run through there?
You would, and first of all, as far as trucks, I don't know.
General commercial, what kind of vehicles would you have going in there?
Automobiles.
Oh.
That's who shops, driving automobiles. But be that as it may, getting onto Napier Road and going down onto Napier Road is obviously the border between Wayne County and
Right.
Washita County, and it's a county road which has its own criteria and has jurisdiction. Salem Township doesn't have jurisdiction over those roads. And we would have to comply with the traffic studies and the appropriate regulations of the counties that are involved, be it Wayne or Washington, both with respect to Godfredson Road and with respect to Napier Road, and in respect to Godfredson Road, to the extent that MDOT is involved, with MDOT's jurisdiction also.
But then you have Hickory Lane right there. What happens to them people?
Well, I think they'd have an opportunity, actually, to have a better entrance if they wanted it, and if they didn't want it, they would have the same kind of access that they have today. And I believe that their curb cut is governed by the same governmental agencies, which is the various county road commissions today, as they would into the future. And if it was Research Office Park, where would they exit? And where would the FedEx trucks go? And where would the construction trucks go? And where would the people who go into their offices there go? So it's not as if you have your conservation easement and no traffic. What you're going to have is, regardless of what level of traffic goes out there, be it Research Office Park, office, or some type of commercial, all will have to exit on roads that are governed by county agencies.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
If I may, we're not conducting a site plan review.
you. Well, I know.
Okay.
But we're supposed to change it.
All right. Did you have anything else?
I'm all set.
Okay. Anyone else here? Well, if I may, I'd like to put a motion up for consideration, and well, let me take a shot at it, and then we'll see if we get a second, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay? So, I move that in accordance with section 68.05 of the Salem Township zoning ordinance, and in consideration of Mr. Pennington's report of February 27th, 2013, and the public hearing conducted on March 4th, 2013, the Planning Commission finds that the proposed rezoning of parcels, and there's 6 of them, so somebody has to get that right. Okay, so the Planning Commission finds that the proposed rezoning of the 6 specific parcels from agricultural to residential office park is initiated by the Township Board, and then I have some findings here to say. Number 1 is consistent with the Township's master plan. Number 2 is justified by the master plan's establishment of an urban services district. And we've got 5 things to touch on here. Number 3, it establishes a desirable precedent in rezoning vacant urban services district parcels in accordance with the master plan. Number 4, it's in accordance with the existing plans for the provision of urban services. And number 5, this was the one I struggled with, but that's not part of it, but then number 5 is, will have an optimal effect on the condition or value of property in Salem Township. And that's the judgment call. And that's not part, but, you know, that was my side note. And then, the motion then continues, in consideration of these findings, the Planning Commission recommends the Township Board approval of the rezoning of the subject parcels from agricultural residential to residential office park. And do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Murillo seconded. Is there any other discussion amongst the members of the Planning Commission? Or comments from our experts to make sure we didn't make an inappropriate motion? Okay. Then I'd like to call for a roll call vote.
Doug, can I ask a question? Will the numbers be inserted? Okay.
If we're all clear on the motion that's been seconded, then I'd like to call for a roll call vote because we seem to have finished the discussion on this subject. So if you'll handle that, please, Ms. Murillo. All in favor, say aye, I suppose, when your name's called.
Pam Merlo, yes. Sandy Petrosky.
Yes.
Casey Kelly.
Yes.
TJ McLaughlin.
Yes.
Darrell Lewandowski.
Yes.
Doug Shepherd.
Yes. Motion passed. Okay, that concludes business item 7. And we'll move on. The next item is item number 8, old business, and we have none. And so we're to item 9, which is reports of commissioners or committees. And so, does anyone up here have comments? Yes, Ms. Brooks.
Yes, March 26th, Tuesday, we canceled the meeting because of the weather conditions.
Be the 4th Tuesday,
March 6th.
7.
At 7 o'clock.
That's not us.
No, that is the Open Space Preservation Committee. We had to cancel the meeting we had scheduled due to weather.
Okay, so you've got a new date for that,
Yes.
and that's going to work. Anything else to make mention of? All right. Item 10 is approval of minutes from February 25th. Would someone care to make a motion?
I move to make the motion to approve the minutes from February 25th as submitted.
Second.
So, voice vote, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes, and we have approved our minutes. Are there any other reports or announcements today? Yes, Ms. Brooks.
At the last meeting, there was a question about the posting of the unapproved planning commission meeting minutes to the website.
Okay, I remember that.
The approved minutes are posted to the website. I did contact the clerk, the current clerk, Mr. Lindsley, and I also spoke with the old clerk, David Trent, and their policy is that they do not publish unapproved minutes, planning commission minutes, to the website. If there is a policy change, it will have to be made in the ordinance.
Okay, so,
The minutes are available. State law requires they are available within 8 days. Someone calls me, emails me, whatever, I will always get you a copy of the draft minutes, but they're normally done within a day or the second day of the meeting, ready for the public. And
okay,
they're
so
available in their office.
So the important thing, right, is to let the public know that they want to see timely draft minutes for planning commission meetings. That all they need to do is contact you either in person or by email.
That's it. Phone call, however.
And maybe what we could do is get a note to that effect somewhere on the township website, which I think would just help remind people that that's the process, so they know we're trying to do the best we can. All right. Any other reports or announcements? Fine, we're on to agenda item 12, which is public comment.
We would just like to thank you folks for,
I'll recognize Mr. Klein.
I'm Norm Klein, you know my dad. We want to thank you very much for supporting the residents.
Okay, we're running our business according to our ordinances, I hope. I believe we are. Anything else? In the back.
I'd like to ask a question, because you're not going to put the draft minutes up. Does that mean you're not going to put the board packet that you get up either?
It is a policy, and if that policy is going to be changed, it will have to be changed at the Board of Trustees level.
The Board of Trustees puts the board packet on.
I know, but it has been the policy of the township not to put the planning commission packets or the unapproved minutes on the website.
Fine. We've asked you before and before and before, and we've gotten these answers of, we will put them on, but we can't put on these huge pieces of paper. But now you say you're not going to give us anything. Thank you.
Anyone else? Fine. So the last item is to declare this meeting adjourned at 8:56 p.m. Thank you.